Dragon Emperor Sun Chapter 591 to Chapter 600. Zhao Wuji looked at Chong Yuanjun like that, opened his mouth, but didn't say anything, and finally he could only sigh. Mr. Chen, let's go out. The Chong reinforcements had already used the tone of an order, and Zhao Waoqi had no choice. David nodded, let's go, we will be invited back in less than 10 minutes. As soon as David's words landed, Zhou Zhaolong burst out laughing. David, you said that the leader will invite you back? What are you? With Master Yuan here, what's the matter with you? It's too good to pretend. Zhou Zhaolong laughed, and Yuan Baishong also raised his mouth. I have never seen such an arrogant person before, it's better for young people to keep a low profile. At this time, the Chong reinforcement army also had an ugly face. What is his identity? How could it be possible to invite a little hairy child like David who has not grown all his hair? Mr. Chen, stop talking. Zhao Waoqi's heart trembled slightly, he was afraid that David would annoy Chong Yuanjun. Zhao Waoqi, I think you're unintentional about this matter today. If you dare to bring anyone to me in the future, be careful that I'll be rude to you. The Chong reinforcement army sullenly roared in a low voice. Understand? No matter what Zhao Waoqi dared to say, he could only nod his head repeatedly, then dragged David and walked out. Walking out of the bedroom, David sat directly on the sofa in the hall. Zhao Waoqi was stunned for a moment, and hurriedly asked, Mr. Chen, it seems that the leader doesn't trust you, so let's leave first, so that the leader doesn't come out and see. Just now Chong reinforcement meant to let Zhao Waoqi take David away, but not to let them sit in the hall. Now David sits in the hall and won't leave. If Chong reinforcement sees this, Zhao Waoqi can't explain it. If we leave, his son will die. After I said it for 10 minutes, someone will invite us in, and it will definitely happen. Pavilion Master Zhao doesn't have to panic, just sit down steadfastly. David said. He actually poured himself a cup of tea, and also poured a cup for Zhao Waoqi. Seeing that David was so confident, Zhao Wuji finally gritted his teeth when he thought of David's identity as a cultivator, and Zhao Wuji also sat down and gave up his life to accompany the gentleman. Just as David and Zhao Waoqi were drinking tea in the outside hall, the permanent reinforcements in the room looked at Yuan Baishong with a pleading expression, Master Yuan, my son's life is in your hands. Master Yuan can save my son, I must be very grateful, and I will hold a magic conference for Master Yuan in Kyoto, so that Master Yuan's reputation can spread in the capital. Chong Yuanjun's attitude is very humble, but Yuan Baishong knows that the more Chong Yuanjun is like this, the greater the danger he will endure. If Chong Yuanjun's son is rescued, everyone will be very happy, but if he can't be rescued in this situation, I'm afraid who is he or Zhou Zhaolong? Don't even think about leaving. Don't worry, Leader Chong, I will do my best. I'm still sure about the poison of the Mirmiao village. Yuan Baishong was sure in his heart that he had once healed people who were bitten by poisonous insects. Then asked Master Yuan to do it. Chong Rijun was excited in his heart. No matter how high his status or official position is, the current standing reinforcements have only one status, and that is his father. He only hopes that his son will get better. Yuan Baishong nodded, walked to the bed again, and took out the cloth bag containing the silver needles again. After picking a silver needle out of it, he gently pricked it on Chong Yuan's finger, only to see the silver needle shining with silver light, but it turned into a black color at a speed visible to the naked eye. It's been a long time, so the venom has invaded the heart, it seems that it can only be from the inside out. Yuan Baishong said, and took out a silver needle with a length of more than 10 centimeters, which was the largest one in the bag. Yuan Baishong held the silver needle and muttered something in his mouth. The silver needle began to vibrate wildly and made a humming sound, as if mosquitoes were flying everywhere. As the silver needle trembled faster and faster, Yuan Baishong's fingertips actually burned a light blue flame, the flame swallowed the silver needle, and quickly burned the silver needle into a fiery red color. Yuan Baishong has been holding the silver needle and never let go. Seeing this scene, the regular reinforcements felt a burst of shock. After all, he had never seen anyone cast a spell before. After all, as the leader of 6 gates, he couldn't believe it. But now that he saw it with his own eyes, Yuan Baishong had to believe it, so he was horrified. Master Yuan is worthy of being the first master of magic techniques in Hong Kong and China. It's incredible. Chang Rijun couldn't help but exclaimed in admiration. Leader, this is just a small trick. Master Yuan's ability is great, but he can come back to life. When Zhou Zhaolong saw the expression of Chang reinforcements, he immediately said proudly. Although Chang Yuanjun knew that being able to bring the dead back to life was simply nonsense, but seeing Yuan Baishong's ability now, Chang Yuanjun did not question Zhou Zhaolong's words. I saw Yuan Baishong holding the already red silver needle and slowly piercing it towards Chang Yuan's heart. The silver needle pierced into the skin, making a prickling sound, and there was a burning smell. When Chang Rijun saw this, his nervous hands were tightly clasped together. He wanted to ask Yuan Baishong, if he continued to stab him like this, wouldn't his son be stabbed in the heart and died? But he didn't ask, he was afraid that he would disturb Yuan Baishong's treatment. What accident happened? Soon, all the silver needles of 10 centimeters pierced into Chang Yuan's chest, only a small part of it was exposed, and then at the top of the part where the silver needle was exposed, black blood began to come out, and then start spraying. It turned out that the silver needle was actually hollow, and the blood spurted out along the silver needle, all black blood. Seeing this, Yuan Baishong hurriedly pulled out a few silver needles again, and plunged them all into Chang Yuan's body in one breath. After the silver needles were all plunged into Chang Yuan's body trembled, and his eyes and mouth suddenly opened. Seeing his son's eyes open, Chang Rijun jumped up excitedly. Son, you finally woke up, look at me. Chang reinforcements shouted at Chang Yuan. But at this time, Chang Yuan's eyes were blood red, and his eyes remained motionless, as if he couldn't hear the shouts of Chang reinforcements at all. Seeing that his son didn't respond at all, Chang Yuanjun looked at Yuan Baishong with a puzzled expression. Master Yuan, what's wrong with my son? Why did he wake up and he doesn't seem to know me? Don't worry, leader, it will be fine soon. Master Yuan said indifferently. Now that Chang Yuan was awake, Yuan Baishong breathed a sigh of relief, and with a wave of his palms, he took out all the silver needles on Chang Yuan's body. Seeing Yuan Baishong's calmness, Chang Yuanjun felt relieved and waited quietly for his son to get to know him. What? Suddenly, Chang Yuan's open mouth let out a loud roar, which directly startled Chang reinforcement. Even Yuan Baishong and Zhou Zhaolong were terrified. Following the roar, Chang Yuan, who had been lying on the bed, sat up directly. His eyes were still blood red, but there was a stream of black air spurting out of his mouth, and then Chang Yuan's entire face quickly turned black. It was as if the whole person suddenly turned black and festered. Seeing his son like that, Chang Rijun was stunned. Yuan Baishong was also stunned. He didn't expect Chang Yuan to become like this. He had already forced the poison out of Chang Yuan's body just now. How could it suddenly increase again? Master Yuan, what's wrong with my son? What's going on? Chang reinforcements asked Yuan Baishong loudly. Don't worry, leader, I'll see what's going on right away. As Yuan Baishong said, he saw his hands quickly slapped towards Chang Yuan on the bed. Every time he slapped the palm, a large amount of black qi burst out from Chang Yuan's mouth. Ah! Chang Yuan's mouth is still making a horrible scream. Chang Yuan, whose eyes were scarlet, was like a beast at this time, staring at Yuan Baishong, as if to kill Yuan Baishong with those terrifying eyes. Yuan Baishong looked at Chang Yuan like that, his scalp was numb, and his forehead started to sweat. He didn't know how Chang Yuan could become like this, and now Yuan Baishong can only try his best to keep pushing the poison to Chang Yuan. In the hall, Zhao Waoqi listened to the movement in the bedroom, his expression changed slightly. Mr. Chen, what happened inside? It's all right, just sit down. David drank tea leisurely, not at all worried. Mr. Chen, there is nothing wrong with the leader often. If something happens to the leader, it will be troublesome. Zhao Waoqi did not dare to let the Chang reinforcements have an accident. As the pavilion owner of the Dharma Protector Pavilion in Kyoto, he accused him of guarding the safety of the capital and protecting these leaders. If something happened to the Chang reinforcements now, and Zhao Waoqi was still at the scene, he would definitely not be able to escape his responsibility. This is probably a capital crime. Don't worry, nothing will happen to the leaders, they will come out within 3 minutes. David looked at the time and said. Seeing that David was so confident, Zhao Waoqi didn't know what to say. He could only look anxiously at the direction of the bedroom. In the bedroom at this time, Yuan Baizhong was already sweating profusely, and the toxins in Chang Yuan's body seemed to be exhausted. But just when Yuan Baizhong wanted to shoot at Chang Yuan again, suddenly a black bug flew out of Chang Yuan's mouth. The bug was extremely fast and went straight towards Yuan Baizhong. Seeing this, Yuan Baizhong's face changed greatly. Puppet bug, this is a puppet bug, run, run. I saw Yuan Baizhong wave his hands, and a large net made of red thread suddenly appeared in front of him, blocking the puppet worm in front of him. At this time, Chang Yuanjun and Zhou Zhaolong were both dumbfounded, and they looked at everything in front of them dumbfoundedly. They didn't understand. How could a person who has been in a coma for more than a year suddenly fly out of his mouth? And they don't know what puppet worm Yuan Baizhong is talking about, they don't even know what a puppet worm is. Yuan Baizhong saw that Chang Rijun and Zhou Zhaolong were still not moving, so he hurriedly shouted again, run, run out. Yuan Baizhong knew that he couldn't hold on for long. He had to know that this puppet worm was the most famous poisonous worm in Miao village. The bigger the puppet worm, the harder it is to deal with. At this time, the puppet worm that Yuan Baizhong was facing was about the size of a child's fist. If he could control such a big puppet worm, he was definitely not an ordinary person in Miao village. Although Yuan Baizhong didn't know that such a big leader of Chang Yuanjun, who in Miao village would dare to cast a puppet on his son, but the other party must be a master, and he was not afraid of the identity of Chang Yuanjun. Seeing Yuan Baizhong yelling again, Chang Rijun and Zhou Zhaolong reacted and hurried out the door. Yuan Baizhong saw the two people running out, so his figure flashed, and he also hurriedly backed out, closing the door directly. After closing the door, Yuan Baizhong realized that his legs were shaking violently, and his body was already soaked with sweat. Lead. Zhao Waoqi saw the Chang reinforcements running out in a panic, and hurried up to meet him. Waoji, you haven't left yet? Chang Yuanjun asked in surprise when he saw that Zhao Wuji was still there. Leader, Mr. Chen said that Yuan Baizhong can't cure your son's disease at all, and he said that you will come out to beg him in 10 minutes, and now you have come out. Zhao Waoqi followed Chang Yuanjun and said. At this time, Chang Yuanjun noticed David who was sitting on the sofa drinking tea, but now Chang Yuanjun was not in the mood to scold David. What he was most worried about was his son. Master Yuan, what happened to my son? What the H3LL is that bug, and why did it come out of my son's mouth? Please save my son. Chang reinforcements walked up to Yuan Baizhong and questioned him. Yuan Baizhong's face was embarrassed, his whole face was twisted, not to mention how ugly, he just said a lot, and now if he said there was no way to save him, would Chang Rijun let him go? You don't have to beg him. He doesn't have the ability to save your son at all. If he had the ability, he wouldn't have run out in such an embarrassed way. David, who was sitting on the sofa, spoke up. Chang Yuanjun turned his head to look at David, although he did not trust David very much, after all David was too young, but at this time, he had to believe it, so he asked David, Mr. Chen can save my son? I already said that I can save you, but you don't believe me. David said lightly. In a word, Chong Yuan-jun was suddenly embarrassed, and his heart was like overturning the bottle of 5 flavors, and he didn't know how to describe it. Mr. Chen, the leader was also deceived by that Yuan Baishong, and I hope you don't care about it and save the leader's son. Zhao Waoqi was afraid that David would not be able to help him because of what happened just now, so he persuaded him. Okay. David put the teacup aside and stood up. Boy, what are you pretending to be? Do you know what the leader's son's body is planted? Where is the mentally damaged and frightened you said? Seeing that David really dared to go in, Yuan Baishong questioned David. Isn't it just a little puppet worm? You are so frightened that you are also worthy of being called the first master of magic in China and Hong Kong. I think it is almost the same as the first master of lyre in China and Hong Kong. David raised the corner of his mouth and smiled disdainfully. When Yuan Baishong was told this by David, he was furious and said, "Little puppet bug. When you see it, you will know if it is a small puppet bug. Do you know that the puppet bug is the most poisonous bug in Miao Village? Manipulating people's minds, if you go in like this, you will immediately become a puppet." David smiled and ignored Yuan Baishong. He killed hundreds of puppet bugs in Swanya Valley. How could he not know about this thing? There is no difference. But just when David was about to open the bedroom door, Yuan Baishong was so frightened that he hid behind David, the first master of magic in China and Hong Kong. Now it is ridiculous. At this time, Chong Yuan-jun was extremely disappointed when he saw Yuan Baishong like that. Thinking about how respectful he was to Yuan Baishong just now, but he didn't trust David at all, Chong Yuan-jun felt even more embarrassed. David opened the door, and a black mist rushed out at once. Before David entered the door, a black shadow rushed out. Zhao Waoqi hurriedly protected the permanent reinforcements, while Yuan Baishong pulled Zhou Zhaolong back quickly. Only David did not move, and when he saw the black shadow that suddenly rushed out, David reached out and grabbed the black shadow. When the black fog dissipated, everyone saw at this moment that it was Chong Yuan who was caught in David's hand. At this time, Chong Yuan's eyes were red and his face was very hideous, and he kept reaching out and grabbing at David. "Yuaner, Yuaner!" Seeing that David was arresting his own son, Chong Ri-jun hurriedly shouted twice. And David looked at Chong Yuan who was caught, and he was about to slap Chong Yuan's head with a palm. But at this moment, Chong Yuan, who had a grim face and red eyes, returned to normal, looking at David like a normal person, with fear in his eyes. "Dad, save me!" Chong Yuan suddenly shouted at Chong reinforcements. Seeing Chong Yuan's recovery, Chong Yuan-jun didn't let go, and he was about to slap Chong Yuan's head with his palm, and immediately said in a hurry, "Hurry up, stop!" Chong Yuan-jun said, slammed into David's body, knocked David away directly, and then hugged Chong Yuan tightly. Son, you are finally healed, finally healed. Dad, what the H3LL is going on? I'm scared. Chong Yuan's body trembled. It's okay, don't be afraid, with Dad here, no one can hurt you." Chong reinforcement looked at Chong Yuan excitedly, tearful. At this time, David, looking at Chong Yuan who had recovered to the original, still had a strong killing intent in his eyes, and his brows also wrinkled. "Leader Chong, your son has not recovered. Now he is not your son. He has become a puppet. Only the puppet worm that kills his body can do it," David said to Chong Yuan-jun. Chong Ri-jun was taken aback for a moment, and then he looked at his son carefully. "Dad, I'm your son, I'm not a puppet, I don't want to die, don't let them kill me." Chong Yuan pretended to be frightened and grabbed Chong Reigning Army's hand tightly. Seeing Chong Yuan like that, Chong Yuan-jun quickly comforted, "Don't worry, no, I won't let you touch you." After speaking, Chong Yuan-jun looked at David and said, "My son is healed now, what kind of puppet is it? Stop talking nonsense. If you don't get rid of this puppet bug, your son will die sooner or later." After David finished speaking, with a flick of his finger, he wanted to go towards Chong Yuan. Bold! Seeing that David still wanted to do something to his son, Chong Yuan-jun suddenly became angry, his aura suddenly rose, and he slapped David with a palm. You must know that the regular reinforcements have great military achievements and their own strength is not bad. This palm has a sound of breaking the sky, and it is extremely powerful. David wasn't afraid of Chang's slap, but he didn't want to fight with Chang's, so he could only step back and dodge the slap. Mr. Chen, what's going on here? Zhao Waoqi hurriedly asked David. Seeing that Chong Yuan is already well, why does David still say that Chong Yuan is not well, and that he is still being controlled by some puppet bug? David did not follow Zhao Waoqi to explain, but saw Chong Yuan-jun and continued, your son is just being manipulated by someone, don't be deceived, otherwise you will be in big trouble. David knew that someone gave Chong Yuan a puppet worm. It must be because of Chong Yuan's identity. You must know that this puppet worm is different from a goo worm. It is much more precious than a goo worm. No one will easily use a puppet worm to control an ordinary person. Now that Chong Yuan has been puppeted by someone, he must want to use Chong Yuan to control the Chong reinforcement army. As the leader of the Six Gates, if the Chong reinforcement army is used by someone with a heart, it will have terrible consequences. You don't need to be alarmist here, it's rare that I can't see my son myself. Chong Yuan-jun didn't believe David's words at all. After he finished speaking, he looked at Yuan Baishong and said, Master Yuan, come and see for me, my son isn't it all right? Seeing this, Yuan Baishong hurriedly nodded his head and stepped forward. With a light wave of one hand, a burst of red light enveloped Chong Yuan. After a while, the red light disappeared, and everything was normal for Chong Yuan. Leader, your son is all right, it's not a puppet manipulated by others, I just used the holy light, if it is really a puppet, under the illumination of the holy light, it is impossible to be calm as usual, don't listen to that David's nonsense. Yuan Baishong said to Chong Yuan-jun. I think that David just didn't have the opportunity to express himself, so he made up the matter of being puppet. Now that Mr. Chong is all right, it is obviously the credit of Master Yuan just now, and David is not convinced, and it seems that he wants to seize it. Credit? Zhou Xiaolong on the side snorted coldly. After listening to Zhou Zhaolong's words, Chong Yuan-jun definitely has some truth. He asked David to take action just now, but David hasn't taken action yet. His son is fine, and he didn't give David a chance to perform at all. It should be that David was a little dissatisfied and wanted to show off in front of him, so he made up his son as a puppet, so that he could take action, and when his son was healed, it would be David's credit. Humph, at a young age, I didn't study hard, but I learned to take credit. My son is fine now, but you still want to take action against him. If you dare to do it, believe it or not, I will keep you from getting out of here. Chong Yuan-jun looked at David with murderous intent flashing in his eyes. Seeing Chong Yuan-jun's eyes, Zhao Waoqi was frightened, and pulled David's sleeve aside. Mr. Chen, forget it. Let's have a long-term plan. Today I have to get rid of this puppet bug, otherwise it will be more than just their family. David was unmoved, he had already decided to get rid of the puppet worm, otherwise he didn't know what would happen next, maybe he would be ruined. Mr. Chen, Yuan Baishong didn't try it with the holy light just now, Chong Yuan is already fine. Zhao Waoqi did not understand why David was so stubborn. Humph, he's AF.art holy light, he's just deceiving you. They were all scared out of the puppet bugs just now, so how could Yuan Baishong not know that he said this to prevent me from taking the credit for it? David had long seen that Yuan Baishong was talking nonsense, how could he not know that Chong Yuan was being controlled by the puppet worm that Yuan Baishong had just seen with his own eyes? Don't talk nonsense, I think you want to take the credit, right? Zhou Xiaolong said with a look of disdain. Whether my son is a puppet or not, I won't let you touch him at all. Chong Reinforcement had a firm look on his face, and guarded him tightly in front of Chong Yuan. If that's the case, don't blame me for being rude. After David finished speaking, he waved his palms in front of him, and red rays of light began to fill the entire hall. I'll show you what the real holy light is. David's voice fell, followed by a red light in the hall. Everyone seemed to be in the flames. What? Chong Yuan suddenly cried out in pain under the irradiation of this red light. Seeing this, the Chong reinforcement army stared, and his figure quickly moved towards David, and the momentum on his body suddenly rose to the top. However, David completely ignored the Chong reinforcement army, and with the current strength of the Chong reinforcement army, there was no way to hurt him. Sure enough, the Chong reinforcement army came to David, and after a palm shot, a strong rebound followed, and the Chong reinforcement army stepped back several steps. Chong Rijun looked at David in disbelief, but the anger on his face became more and more intense. Zhao Wuji, do you want to be dismissed if you don't stop him? Chong Rijun shouted at Zhao Waoqi, who was still stunned by the sight. When Zhao Waoqi heard this, he was in a hurry like an ant on a hot pan, and looked at David with a pleading expression. Mr. Chen, you should stop. Gate Master Zhao, if you believe me, just watch from the side, if not, you just need to take action. David is determined to destroy this puppet worm. Seeing that David was determined, Zhao Waoqi had no choice. He would not do anything to David, and he also knew that he was not David's opponent at all. Zhao Wuji, if you don't do it, I will revoke your position. Seeing that Zhao Waoqi still didn't make a move, Chong Rijun roared angrily. Leader, there must be a reason for Mr. Chen to do this, please believe him. Zhao Waoqi persuaded Chong Rijun. Art, my son was almost killed by him. Chong Yuanjun saw his son screaming in pain, so he said to Yuan Baishong, Master Yuan, you quickly stop him, as long as you can stop him, I can grant you any request. Yuan Baishong's words made Yuan Baishong happy, and he nodded immediately. Leader, I'll take action, but you also know that fighting with magic means death or injury. If I accidentally kill David, you can't be held accountable. My responsibility. Yuan Baishong just wanted to take the opportunity to take revenge on David, and killed David. No, no. Chong reinforcement said hurriedly. At this time, Chong Yuan was already grim-faced, holding his head in his hands, rolling on the ground, and it was very painful to see. If that's the case, then I'll do it. Yuan Baishong said, his body suddenly rioted, and then a palm waved out. The palm wind turned into a huge palm and went towards David, and the red light shining on Chong Yuan was also blocked by this huge palm. It made Chong Yuan feel a little better. Dad, save me, I don't want to die. Chong Yuan held Chong Rijun's thigh tightly, and his eyes were full of horror. Son, don't worry, no one can kill you, I have let Master Yuan take action, don't worry. Chong Rijun squatted down, hugged Chong Yuan tightly and comforted him. Mr. Chen. Zhao Waoqi saw that Yuan Baishong had already made his move, and the moment he made his move, it was such an earth-shattering situation that he hurriedly wanted to go up and help David. Zhao Wuji, if you dare to help David, I will not only remove you from your post, but also punish you. Chong Rijun looked at Zhao Waoqi angrily. Zhao Waoqi froze in place, like an ant on a hot pan in a dilemma. George Zhao, as you can see, a mere little warlock can't help me. The corners of David's mouth were slightly raised, and he said with a look of disdain. Boy, you won't be so arrogant in a while. Yuan Baishong said, with words in his mouth. A roaring flame suddenly burst out from the originally huge palm, and the heat wave swept the entire hall in an instant. Zhou Zhaolong had a grim smile on his face at this time. David ruined his good deeds, so he deserved it. Now he wants to watch David die with his own eyes. But in the next moment, everyone was stunned. I saw Yuan Baishong's huge palm with flames hanging above David's head at this time, and there was no way to move towards David at all. At this time, David's whole body was shrouded in red light, like a god who descended from the earth. Under the red light, the huge palm began to gradually become smaller, and the flame gradually went out. How is that possible? Yuan Baishong's eyes widened with a look of astonishment. This is his most powerful ultimate move. Yuan Baishong planned to kill David as soon as he made a move, so he didn't keep his hands at all, but he didn't expect that his ultimate move would not hurt David at all. What else do you have? Just use it. David blew a light breath, and the palm that the fist wind condensed disappeared under this blow. Yuan Baishong looked at David, all the hair on his body exploded, and the whole person was stunned. You? Who are you? What kind of magic do you use? Who is your master? Yuan Baishong asked David several questions in one breath. Yuan Baishong has been practicing magic for decades. Yuan Baishong has also worshipped several masters, and has followed many people to learn and compete, but he has never seen such a technique as David. The red light on David's body just now gave people a sense of great coercion, which made people want to worship when they saw it. If Yuan Baishong hadn't calmed down, he would have knelt down to David just now. You're talking too much nonsense. If you don't have anything else to do, then get out of the way. David did not answer Yuan Baishong's words, and he did not need to follow Yuan Baishong to say this. Although Yuan Baishong's face was full of anger, he no longer dared to follow David, so he could only dodge aside. Chong Yuanjun saw that Yuan Baishong, a master of magic skills, was so frightened by David that he did not dare to do it. Leader Chong, I said that your son is a puppet now, and the people behind the scenes told him to say so. You can't believe it. Now that I have killed the puppet bug, your son can still be saved. Yes, even if the puppet worm is eliminated, your son will not survive. David looked at Chong Yuanjun and said. Chong Rijun held Chong Yuan, hesitating in his heart. He didn't know whether to believe David's words or not. Leader, Mr. Chen will never harm young Master Chong, please believe him. At this time, Zhao Waoqi also persuaded Chong Rijun. Chong reinforcements were tempted, and a pair of hands slowly prepared to let go of Chong Yuan. Dad, you can't trust them, I'm your son, I'm not a puppet, I'm your son, look at me. When Chong Yuan saw this, he held the Chong reinforcements tightly, and cried loudly. Chong Yuanjun looked at Chong Yuan like that, and couldn't bear to let David do it. David knew that he had no choice but to act forcefully, and Chong Yuanjun had already been confused by that Chong Yuan at this moment. Little Miao people, dare to hit the leader's idea, damn. After David finished speaking, he reached out and grabbed Chong Yuan. Seeing this, Chong Yuanjun wanted to stop it, but it was too late. David's speed was too fast, and in the blink of an eye, Chong Yuan was in David's hands. Dad, save me, save me. Chong Yuan struggled desperately. But at this moment, David didn't give Chong Yuanjun another chance to save him. He slapped Chong Yuan's forehead with a palm, and then a red light flashed from the top of Chong Yuan's head and entered Chong Yuan's body. Chong Yuan began to become ferocious, roaring in pain, but no matter how much he roared, David still held on to Chong Yuan. Soon, Chong Yuan's eyes became blood red again. He suddenly opened his mouth, and a fist-sized puppet worm flew out of his mouth. After the puppet worm flew out, it did not attack David, but flew directly towards the window, intending to escape. Want to escape? David raised the corner of his mouth, let go of Chong Yuan, and chased after the puppet worm. At this time, after the puppet worm flew out of his body, Chong Yuan fell into a coma again and lay straight on the ground. Son! The Chong reinforcements hurried forward to support Chong Yuan. At this moment, David had already chased the window and grabbed the puppet bug. The huge puppet worm kept twisting its body, but it couldn't break free from David's shackles at all, and finally opened its mouth, and a black gas spewed out of the puppet worm's mouth. Everyone be careful, this black gas is highly poisonous. Seeing this, Yuan Baishong hurriedly reminded everyone, and then tightly closed his breath. But just when everyone panicked and closed their breaths, they saw David open his mouth and suddenly sucked hard, and all the black air was sucked into his stomach by David. These black chi are highly poisonous to others, but they are the best cultivation resources for David, and David will not waste them. Seeing that David actually sucked all the black gas into his stomach, Yuan Baishong was dumbfounded, and his face was incredible. Others didn't know it, but he knew how powerful the poisonous gas of this puppet worm was. Generally, a puppet worm will not spew poisonous gas. If the poisonous gas in the body is sprayed out, the puppet worm will not survive. Unless at a critical moment, the puppet worm's master will let the puppet worm perish with the other party. After all, cultivating such a giant puppet bugs are hard. I saw that the black gas spewed by the puppet worm was swallowed by David, and the fist-sized puppet worm stopped struggling at this time, and its body collapsed directly. Looking at the dead puppet worm, David threw it out directly. A pair of puppet worm skins are of no use to David. At the same time when the puppet worm died, in a remote courtyard in Kyoto, a middle-aged man in a black robe sitting in a closed room suddenly got up and slammed the tea bowl in front of him to the ground. This puppet worm is his, but it took him more than 10 years to cultivate it, and he didn't expect it to die like this. When the guard outside heard the movement, he hurriedly pushed the door and walked in. Seeing the debris on the ground, the guard bowed his head in fright. "Has the fourth child not come back yet?" The middle-aged man in black robe asked the guard. "Go back to Dailito." Salito came back yesterday, but seeing that you were in the room, I didn't dare to disturb you. The guard replied hurriedly. "Let the fourth come to see me," said the middle-aged man in black robe. The guard hurried away, and soon, a man with a mustache and a pointed mouth walked in. "Fourth, King Miao issued the urgent summon order in such a hurry. Did something happen to Miao village?" The black-robed man asked the man with the sharp-mouthed monkey cheeks. "Brother, what's the matter?" The adopted son of King Miao died, as if he was killed by a man named David. The sharp-mouthed monkey-gill man said indifferently. "Is that Jian Feng?" "Yes, it's him, he died miserably," the man with the pointed mouth and monkey cheeks nodded. "Humph, it deserves it, this guy only knows how to harm little girls, I've long since disliked him." The black-robed man snorted coldly. "Brother, this time when I go back, King Miao asked me about our plan. Now that Miao village is under strict supervision, it is difficult for King Miao to make any moves." The man with the sharp-mouthed monkey's cheeks asked. Hearing this, the black-robed man's face instantly turned hideous, his fists clenched, and he gritted his teeth. "My puppet worm is dead." "What? The puppet worm is dead? How did it die? How could it be like this? After this incident, I'm telling you, you go to inquire first to see if there is anything wrong with Chong Yuanjun's family. I let the puppet worm spit out poisonous gas and commit suicide. The poisonous gas can kill people with a radius of more than 10 meters. The family of the reinforcements will be poisoned to death." The black-robed man said with a worried look on his face. "Brother, are you crazy? Chong Yuanjun is the leader of 6 sects. If he was poisoned and traced to our Miao village, wouldn't we be out of luck?" The man with the sharp-mouthed monkey cheeks asked in a panic. "What are you shouting? I was forced to helpless at the time, and now you go to investigate the news immediately." The black-robed man glared at the man with the sharp-mouthed monkey cheeks. "Okay." The man with the pointed mouth and monkey cheeks nodded, turned, and walked out. At this moment, in the hall of Chong Yuanjun's house, Chong Yuanjun was shouting heart-rendingly while holding the unconscious Chong Yuan. "Yuaner, Yuaner." He hopes that his son is waking up. He hasn't seen his son speak or open his eyes for more than a year. He has just recovered from Chong Yuan, so Chong Rijun is so excited. No matter if he is puppet or not, he only hopes that his son will alive. This is also the reason why Chong Yuanjun never wanted to let David do it. If Chong Yuan really has 3 strengths and 2 weaknesses, he will never see his son in the future. "Mr. Chen, go and see Mr. Chong. Seeing Chong Rijun's heart-wrenching roar, Zhao Waoqi hurriedly stepped forward and said to David. Yet. David nodded. Arriving in front of Chong Yuanjun, Zhao Waoqi crouched down and comforted Chong Yuanjun, "Leader, if Mr. Chen can cure young Master Chong, don't be sad." Chong Yuanjun raised his head with tears in his eyes. When he saw David's firm and confident gaze, he did not speak, but let go of Chong Yuan and slowly stood up. David squatted down, put one hand on Chong Yuan's forehead gently, and the spiritual power was injected into Chong Yuan's body. The rotten and blackened palm actually improved. A few minutes later, Chong Yuan slowly opened his eyes, and at this moment David's forehead was full of sweat. Chong Yuan's poisoning incident is too long, and he has been in a state of mental damage for more than a year. To restore Chong Yuan, David has consumed a lot of spiritual power. Yuaner, Yuaner. Seeing Chong Yuan open his eyes, Chong reinforcements jumped up excitedly. Dad, where am I? Chong Yuan looked confused and looked around. Of course it's at home. You've been in a coma for more than a year. Don't you remember what happened just now? Chong reinforcements asked Chong Yuan. You must know that Chong Yuan has just woken up, and everything is as usual. Why can't I remember anything now? As I said, it wasn't him, he was just a puppet at the time, and someone manipulated the puppet bug to control his body. David said to Chong Yuanjun. Looking at Chong Yuan's bewildered look, Chong Yuanjun finally believed what David said. Chong Yuanjun helped Chong Yuan up, pointed at David and said, "Yuaner, thank you Mr. Chen quickly, he saved your life." Chong Yuan looked at David in confusion, and saw that David was about the same age as him, and didn't move for a while. "Leader Chong, it's just a little effort, no need to thank you," David said lightly. The more David was like this, the more embarrassed Chong Yuanjun's face became. He had just attacked David and ordered Zhao Waoqi and Yuan Baishong to attack David. Fortunately, Lord David has a large number of people, so he didn't care about him. If the other party goes away in anger, his son will be helpless today. Mr. Chen is young, I didn't expect such a broad-mindedness, it really makes me ashamed. Chong Reinforcement Army blushed and said embarrassedly. Leader Chong is polite, you have done your best for the country and the people, what I have done is nothing. David said modestly. At this moment, Yuan Baishong, who was full of shock, came over. At this moment, he looked at David with respect and admiration in his eyes. Junior Yuan Baishong, meet Master Chen. Yuan Baishong walked to David and bowed deeply. In their magic world, there is no age distinction, they are all divided by strength. Although David is young now, his strength is obviously higher than him, so Yuan Baishong calls himself a junior. Meet Master Chen. That Zhou Zhaolong also hurried over and bowed to David. Now even Yuan Baishong is respectful to David, and Zhou Zhaolong does not dare to be arrogant anymore. Humph, how did you mock Mr. Chen just now? You won't forget it after a while, will you? Zhao Waoqi looked at Yuan Baishong and Zhou Zhaolong and said with a look of disdain. Zhao Waoqi's words made the two of them blush instantly, feeling ashamed.